So you know you all have to accept now. That's kind of the new rule. All right. So before I load the spreadsheet, let me just say a couple of things. So the assumption for this session is that you have no prior knowledge of Excel. I know that some of you do have some knowledge, and I'm sure there'll be a couple of tricks that you learn, but this is sort of foundational to set the groundwork for the series, which we're going to start in a couple of weeks, which will take you from the very beginning up to some pretty advanced features. So you could also, even though this is still an intro, I would say it's kind of a little tips and tricks-y in the sense that I'm going to show you kind of some little cool features that even those some of you who are experienced in Excel may not know. And I'm going to ask you as we go along whether or not you are familiar with this, okay? Because that's helpful feedback for me, whether or not you already were aware of this. So on that note, let's get started. All right. So just a first thing. So again, very, very basic, but what makes Excel or spreadsheets different from word processing programs or applications is that they're divided up into cells. So one of the questions I often get asked is like, what can you put in a cell? And the answer is you can put 4 different things in a cell. So one thing you put in a cell is a number, just a straight number. The next thing, I could have left that there. The next thing you can put in is text. By the way, by default, whenever you put a number in, it's going to put it on the right side. If it's text, it's left to right, the way we write. Or you can put a formula. So formulas are always done with an equal sign. And here I'm actually putting the, the numbers for the formula right in, okay? So that would be 5 plus 2. I can also do it by cell reference. So this is really the same thing again, except I selected the cell address, the cell addresses, and that's also going to give me the result, but that's still a formula. And then the last one is a function that I'm going to show you down below, only because I need at least, for this function, I want to show you at least a couple of cells to refer to. This is the most common function in Excel, which is sum. And all functions have a particular syntax. They all also involve an equal and the name of the function, and then some parameters that are surrounded by parentheses. I'm actually going to show you in the series a couple of functions that actually have nothing in between. They are just an open and closed parentheses, but you still require to have that. That's how it knows it's a function, okay? All right. Again, real basics. So, we're normally, if you've done longhand arithmetic, you know the basic arithmetic symbols, plus, minus, multiplication, division. So the good news is plus is the same, minus is the same, but multiplication and division are different. So typically multiplication, if we're doing it longhand, it would be an X. We don't use an X, we use a star. That's the star that appears on top of your 8 on your keyboard, okay? So an example is going back to my formula here. If I wanted to do 5 times 2, I would use the star, and that gives me 10. The other one is division. Now, as it turns out, there actually isn't even a division symbol on your keyboard, okay? So unless you are going to use fancy characters, you really don't have one. So what we use for division is the slash. It's actually considered a forward slash, and that's the slash that appears underneath the question mark on your keyboard, okay? And that kind of is like the fraction symbol. So if I wanted to do 6 You always have to do an equal sign first. 6 divided by 2, that's going to give me 3. Okay, so just be aware of that. And again, very basic here. All right, so I actually did not write this in Excel format. I just wrote it the way we would do it longhand, but I want you to tell me what you think. This is, by the way, this is the only math problem I'm going to ask you to do in this session, but I'd like you to, when you think you know the answer, put the answer in the chat, what you think the result of that is, what the answer to that is. This is like, I see these on Facebook all the time, you know. So if you think you know the answer, put it in. And we'll see what we get. So far we got 3 17s. We got a 22, a 17, 17.
Where's this?
And a lot of people are too chicken to answer. Okay. So the answer is, the majority got it right, 17. So for the one person who's looking and says, why isn't it 22? The reason for that is order of operation. So I went to school in New York City, but I've talked to people, actually, I did a session once for USM in Mississippi, and they told me they actually learned the same thing in Mississippi in school. But it's order of operation. The way I was taught to remember it is, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. I've also heard this called PEMDAS, okay? But it's basically parentheses, exponent, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. These are actually pairs. Order does not matter, but we always do the higher order first, not in the order it's written. So here, if you didn't do that, and you just read this, you would say 5 plus 6, that's 11, times 2, that's 22. But with order of operation, it would be 6 times 2, which is 12, plus 5. Why did I go over this? Because Excel knows order of operation. And if I don't understand that, I might be confused why I'm not getting the answer I intended. Now, by the way, if you intended to do the 6 first, that's what parentheses are for, and then it would be 22. So I just wanted to make sure everybody remembered that. It's more like people forget, okay? All right, so that's it for Excel environment. And now what I want to go on and talk to you about is cell fills. One of my favorite features of Excel, real-time saver, okay? And I'm going to give you a few examples, but let's start with the first one. So I have here a 1 and a 2. I need at least 2 numbers for Excel to know what I have in mind. So I'm now going to highlight both cells, and I'm going to scroll down, and it filled in all of the numbers in series, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, it's very smart. If the series ranges were different, it would pick that up. So if I did 0 and 5, not 1 and 5, because that would be a range of 4, then it's going to give me every 5th number, or it could be odds or evens, etc. Okay? How many of you knew that? Yes, no? Okay, good. All right. So here's a few more. Now here I actually only need 1. And notice I abbreviated the months. So it abbreviated them. If I spell it out, it'll spell it out. Does it work across? I'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. Yes. Okay. So if I spell it out, it'll go across. Okay. What else? So you abbreviates the days of the week. You spell it out, it spells it out. questions so far? How many of you were familiar with that? Now, here's one that a lot of people don't know. Now, I need two of them here, but I do want to point out something I'm going to, in the series, I'll go into more details about. But Excel has this really cool flash fill feature where it anticipates what you want to do in a lot of cases. So as soon as I type invoice, it puts in the same thing again. In this particular case, it's not what I want. I need at least two numbers so it knows what I have in mind. And once again, I'm going to highlight them. And it's going to give me a series. Now, why this is significant and really kind of cool is that whenever you start anything in Excel that begins with text, it assumes it's text. And this is actually considered text, not numbers, even though it has a number in it. Yet Excel is smart enough to still be able to pull down a range, even those are numbers. Now, if you're wondering if it's because I put the pound sign, it has nothing to do with it. So for example, if I had done these have to match or it won't work. So it's simply that my text ended in a number. How many of you are familiar with that? So that could be student ID numbers, purchase order numbers, work order numbers. A lot of good uses. Okay. Moving right along. So I guess I can. I'm an old timer. I'm so old. When I started out in accounting, they didn't even have computers. In fact, I bought my first pocket calculator in college. It was like $130. It was like what you could get for like $3 today. Well, nobody even has any pocket calculators anymore because our phones are all calculators now. But it was like a ton of money. But there were definitely no PCs. There were mainframe computers. I did some programming classes in college. So when I first started out, we had adding machines and we had paper that looked like this. You would buy green analysis pads that had little boxes, okay? And one of the things they trained me as a new young accountant was always document. Yeah, we had punch cards too. Yes, hollering cards, the old IBM cards, yes. Okay, so you don't look that old though. Okay, so anyway, I'm not going to say anything to Pam. Pam and I are contemporaries, but one of the things that I was taught, and I think it was a really important lesson, was put notes, document your spreadsheets. Because, you know, you may pick up something in 6 months later, you may not remember what you did, or someone else might pick it up. Okay. Yes. Okay. You can beat me up for that one. Okay. So what I want to do is talk to you about how you create a text box. So what I did is I highlighted a bunch of cells. Here's my quick process for doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up top. This is all in the home ribbon. I'm going to go merge. So now that's going to give me a box, but it's going to put the text in the wrong spot. Okay. So I kind of have to go what I call around the circle of all of the options here. So I'm going to leave the merge in center. I'm going to go left justification because we go from left to right, except in Israel, or top to down in Japan, and to the top. And then I'm going to go wrap text. So now that's going to give me my perfect box. Starts on the top, and it's all around. And I just wanted to put in enough text so you could see it wrap around. Okay. And so you could fill the box with text. The one thing that you cannot do, by the way, in all fairness, I did not know this. Somebody in Chappaqua showed this to me, one of the secretaries a few years ago, because, you know, there's so many things in Excel, you might miss something, but they knew it and I didn't. Okay, the big problem here is if I want to put a return in, I can't, because when you hit a return in a box, it takes you out of the box. However, there is a workaround. Okay, so I'm on a Mac. So on the Mac, you hit your options key and return, and that will allow you to go down to a, you know, like in effect a return. If you're on a PC, it's the Alt. I think it is a Control or return. Yeah. Well, the option key is only a key that's on a Mac. It would be the Alt key on a PC. Okay. You know, Stephen Jobs had to be different. But yeah, it actually even appears in the same place as an Alt key appears on a PC. Okay. So it would be on a PC, it would be Alt return. Okay. And then that allows you to put a box. Okay. Which brings us to our next topic. Okay. So if you remember, well, I don't know if I mentioned this already, I'll do it again. If you have text and the text is bigger than the box, it will spread to the next cell over, bigger than the cell, unless there's something in that cell, in which case it truncates, okay? Numbers are treated a little differently. I'll come back to that in a minute. But one of the things I like to say, and this is just some data. So you can have up to 256 columns in Excel and thousands of rows. I think 16,000 rows. But from a practical point of view, real estate is an issue, because for anything that we're going to print, if it's simply, you know, like ported data that we're then going to analyze, it doesn't matter. But if it's something where it's a report, we're going to print it, then real estate matters, because if there's too many, if it's too wide or too long, it won't fit on a page. And even though you have the ability to do, you know, a print to fit, it's going to be too small to sit. Okay. So we're always trying to get our columns as small as possible. And nobody take offense at this, but I hate hyphenated names. Because if I didn't have a hyphenated name, I could probably have, and this is just an example of one hyphenated name, I could probably have my box around this size, but because of this one hyphenated name, I have to have it out to here. So I want to show you a little trick that you can use that can solve that, okay? And there are a couple ways you can access it. You can access it up top on your menu with format, or the easiest way is to go and right click and go to format cells. Now, normally, if you've never done it before, it's going to show you this. This is the dialog box. I had selected it before, so it took me right to the place. But you're going to go to the second one. You're going to go to the bottom and you're going to click shrink to fit. Now, I'm going to open that up again because I want to show you something. So here you see it's down below, it's shrink to fit. Now notice it says wrap text and shrink to fit. Those two are incompatible. You either have to pick one or the other. So if you're wrapping text, it says if the box is too big, go to a second line. Shrink to fit says shrink the text. So here I want shrink to fit, okay? So now look what happens when I change the size of my column. Can you see what it did? It made the one name smaller. So let's just talk about what the rule is here. So no matter how big I make it, it's never going to go any bigger than the font size. So here the font size is 12. So no matter how wide my column is, it never gets bigger than 12. However, as I shrink it, it gets smaller. And, you know, I might be able to live with this, having one name be smaller. I had that a number of times in reports where one particular company has a very large name, you know. No, you could actually set it for your whole spreadsheet. Well, you would have to highlight it. So here's an example, Pam. So I could select it for all of this. Format cells, shrink to fit. And now it's going to work for all of these. So notice this one, it shrunk, but it didn't shrink any of these because the width was still okay. And I can also have used it for the titles. Now, I didn't have to select these separately. I could have picked the whole thing. And now you'll see it even works with the titles. Okay, so now let's talk about numbers because that's the other one that causes problems. Okay. All right, so in Excel, and I'm going to pick a ridiculously large number. Well, that should not have happened. That was weird. All right, let me try again. Okay. So what happened here was my number was bigger than my cell. So whenever you have a number that exceeds the width of your cell, instead of spreading it to the next cell or truncating, it gives you the pound signs. Have any of you ever seen the dreaded pound signs? Yes, no? So in a way, that's a good thing because it's warning you that the number doesn't fit. If it didn't do that, you might actually, if a number truncated, you might actually think it was a smaller number, right? So it's actually giving you a little bit of a warning. So there's a couple of options here. I can certainly widen the, I can widen the cell, but actually this is another great example where shrink to fit is perfect. And now it just made the number slightly smaller, but it still fits. So it's pretty much my practice that whenever I'm working on a spreadsheet that involves numbers, I always select shrink to fit. Another example where I really like shrink to fit is there's a couple of forms that we have in Excel that are used for like a billing sheet. And all of a sudden I get like one particular vendor or the name of a kid that's too big. And rather than start wrecking the form, I just hit shrink to fit and everything works. Okay. So how many of you are familiar with shrink to fit? I think it's a really cool feature. All right. By the way, I like to make some comparisons. This is not a feature, at least yet, that is available in Google Sheets. It's a uniquely Excel feature. There are some things Google Sheets can do that Excel can't do, but this happens to be one where Excel really wins the prize. Okay. All right. So moving right along, we're doing well. I should be able to get through everything we have to cover today. Okay. So I want to talk to you about the most common functions in Excel and a little shortcut. This is one of the differences. Besides the fact that they're from two different companies, they compete with each other. They're both spreadsheets. One is a Microsoft product, is older. One is a Google product and is newer. One is kind of more deeper and feature rich. One is cheaper. And in the case of Google Sheets, has more collaborative tools. So there are pros and cons. Okay. When I am going to be doing a Google series in March that will be sponsored by Western Suffolk BOCES in New York, and anybody can sign up. And that will actually be looking at Google. In it, I will compare Google Sheets with Excel. Okay. But from time to time, I'll just mention a few, because any of you work with Google Sheets at all? Some people kind of work in both. Yeah. So I always try to highlight differences. Okay. All right. So let's look at this next one. So the most common function in Excel is the sum function. And that is equal sum and the range. And I always recommend selecting the range rather than putting in the number, because it's easier to make a mistake. If you select it, you can visually see it. You are required to have a closed parentheses here, but Excel is very smart. If you just hit return, it'll put it in. Okay. So one of the other really cool uses of cell fills is once I have one, I can spread it across. Now, this is relative copying, because it didn't just take 1486 and make all of the numbers 1486. It assumed I meant the next column over. By the way, if you ever want to know, this is another thing I really love about Excel. If you double click, you can really tell where the range is. So here you can see where the range is. If I double click here, it's assuming it's the February and the March and the total. Okay. So that's really kind of cool. All right. And in most cases, we want that. In one of the examples we're going to do today, we don't. I'm going to talk to you how to deal with that. Okay. Just in the case of sum, there is a shortcut. So if you put your cursor in that cell, you highlight that cell, and this is on the home ribbon. If you go up to the top, you'll see it's the Greek symbol, the sigma symbol. And if you click that, it'll automatically put in the sum function and you can hit enter. Now, the only thing that it's not a super major problem here is it made an assumption about what your range was. And that will only work if there are no blank items. So case in point, if I took out that 500 and I now went and did the symbol, it only went up until it hit a blank. It didn't know what else I wanted to do. Not a major problem. I can always drag it up, but it won't be automatic because of the blank. A lot of cases we don't have blanks, so this can be really handy. You just go to the sum function and then you can scroll it across. Okay, how many of you were familiar with that? Kind of handy, quick. Excel has a lot of like really cool shortcuts. Okay, so we're going to do a few more, just quick ones. This is the max function. That's the largest number. Min function. That's the smallest. Average, you have to type out average. You can't do AVG because that's a different function. And that's the mean, because there are more than one average. And then count, which is going to count the number of items. So here, because it's all filled in, I should get the same result for all of them. But again, that's only because they're all filled in. If one of them, for example, that would now be an 8. Okay. So just a quick thing about the count function. Peculiar aspect to the count function. So there are 4 items. So I'll be lazy. I can spread across. So count does not work with text, only works with numbers. But there is a solution. You can use another function called count A. And count A works with text. Actually, count A will work with numbers as well. So you might be tempted to only want to use count A. In the series, I'll explain to you why you really don't want to do that. However, you can absolutely count other items. In fact, you can even do conditional counts, which is way beyond what I want to do today. But for example, I can also do and it only counted the pens because I told it only count the pens, and it's not case sensitive. Okay, so more to learn when we do the series. Okay. So here's just a little bit of it's not a complicated problem, just a little simple budgeting example. So what I'm going to do is I have my actual monthly expenses. I want to figure out what my estimate is for the quarter. And I'm doing it by cell reference. So my answer is 3,000, which is correct, 3 months and a quarter. Okay. So now I'm going to scroll down. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Anybody want to guess why before I tell you? So maybe it's too late in the day to guess. Okay. Well, you're sort of right. Okay. No, that's not why. So, and it has nothing to do with sum. Here's why. Okay. So this is an example where relative copying did me in. That's correct, Lisa. It's actually relative reference. Now I need to change it. Okay. So what's happening here is, by the way, there's another wonderful thing about Excel. If you ever want to know where the references are, just double click. And if there's more than one item, it actually changes them to different colors. So I can see the blue, that comes from here, and that comes from here. So that's fine. But when I get to the next one, this was okay. But here it went, because I went down, it went down. And since there was nothing in the cell, it's going to come in as a blank. So the perfect, proof of that is to do this. Okay. But that's not what we want to do. Okay. So this brings us, this is a segue to explain this concept of, I need the 3 there, references. So there are 3 types of reference: relative reference, absolute reference, and mixed reference. Okay. So relative reference says I go down, go down. I go across, go across. Absolute reference says whether I go down or across, lock it in. Okay. Don't move it. And mixed, it says lock one or the other. So the way you lock is by putting a $ in front of that part of the address. So here in B4, there's no $, so that's just across or down. Here I'm locking everything. Here I'm locking the column, but not the row. Here I'm locking the row, but not the column. So if I locked everything here, it would work. However, it's a good practice to learn to do it correctly. So this is a question for Lisa, since she got the answer. Well, you all can answer it. So here, do I want to lock the row or the column? And if it's worth a guess, it's only one or the other. So Lisa, yeah, sorry about that. Well, either one of you can answer. Okay. So here's the question: do I lock the row? There's a Lisa. Yes, she's showing up on the chat. So yes. Okay. Well, either one of you can answer. Okay, so who thinks you should lock the column? Who thinks you should lock the row? Who's not brave enough to answer? Okay. So it's definitely mixed, but which one? Do I lock the column or the row? That would work, but it's not a good practice. It's best to do it correctly. Okay. All right. And the answer is you lock the row. You lock the row. So the question is, how do you know that? All right. So think about what I'm doing. I am copying down. I'm going down the rows. See, it may be confusing because you're thinking I'm in this column, but I'm actually moving down the row. So let's just talk about what the process is like. So the first thing you do is just do the first part. You don't worry about reference. You just do the problem. Okay. Now, once you do that, you come back in and say, okay, what do I need to lock? Well, I don't want to do anything with the blue, but here I want to just lock the row. So as I go down, it won't change it. And that does it. And yes, Lisa, it would have worked if I had locked the other one, because I was only going down the column. Might have been a problem when I started to go to annual, though. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So we'll revisit that as a topic in the series. So if you're still a little, how should we say, a little unsure about that, don't worry about it. We'll definitely, give another bite at that apple. Okay. So 2 more quick topics. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is data validation. Now I'm going to do actually a whole session on data validation. We're going to take a deep dive into data validation. But what I want to do with you today is just do the most common data validation with you, and that so you can use right away. And then when we get to the series, you'll be able to really, dig your teeth into all the uses. Okay. So first, what is data validation? It's what Excel will accept in a cell. Okay. And the normal default is to accept anything. So we have an ability to control that and make it more limited. So the most common use I've seen is creating a drop-down list. Okay. So what you're going to see here is the default is any value. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to select list. By the way, let me correct something. This is a habit I do just for training so that I remember which cell I want to do it in. Normally, you wouldn't have to worry about that if you were doing some sort of a report because you'd have name here or whatever. But since I'm just picking a random cell, I always like to color it, okay? So I'm going to go name and to list. And now I'm going to put in dog, cat, fish with a comma between each word. So what you're going to notice as soon as I do that, I'm going to get a little, I'm going to get a little drop down box that goes what? Dog, cat, fish. Okay. So I can just select any one of them. Now I can also enter it. However, if I decide to enter something else, it rejects it. So it will only allow me to put in what I've selected. So that's one way I can do it. The other way I can do it, and I'll just do this above, just to put a different color. The other way I could do this data validation list, and then go to the corner, select the range symbol and select the items. Notice it locks them in. Absolute reference. So if I copy this, it's gonna keep them. And now I have dog, cat, and fish. By the way, just to show you that you can really work with a pretty big list. So here are all the cities in New York State, and here are all the counties in Florida. Maybe we'll do the Florida counties this time. And it's just easier if I can see them all on the screen. So once again, I'll just pick a color so I know where I'm doing this. And I'm going to go data validation, list, and I'm going to select my list. I might miss one item. I think you get the general point. Can enter. Now I'll make it bigger so you can see it. Okay. And now I have all of my counties, and notice I get even like a scroll down. So I could certainly have a fairly large list. I don't think you know, I don't think you want to have 400 items, but you certainly, you know, I've seen this done where it was all the staff in a building, or even if it's not a really large list, all of the bargaining units or all the divisions, you know, so you can definitely scroll down and have a list. It doesn't alphabetize them, so I'd have to alphabetize my list first, which is what I did here, sort my list. But once I have that, that works. Okay. Just a last thing on this, and then I'll show you kind of a cool application. Okay. So, you know, maybe I screwed up here. And what do I mean by screwed up here? Well, maybe I assumed that people only had dogs, cats, and fish. So when I'm asking somebody what kind of a pet they have a bird, and it won't let them put it in, right? So I have an ability to address that. Okay. So what I do is I go, anytime you want to edit these, you just go data validation list, and it'll bring you to the item. I'm going to go to where it says error alert. The default is to stop me from putting anything else in. If I just uncheck this box up top, that'll still give me the drop-down menu, but it allows me to enter other items. Okay. So just a matter of terminology. If the only item you can enter are the ones on the list. It's a drop down. If it'll let me enter other items, it's called a combo box. So a combo box is a drop down that will also allow you to enter other things. And which one you pick is up to you depending on your need. All right. When we do the whole session on this, I'm going to do a deep dive. So I know we lost his video now, but there's a little history with this because, well, the original requester for this actually was one of the districts in Westchester in my area, but they're using this in Chappaqua in the facilities department. I know because I built it for them. So what we have here is an evaluation form. One of the challenges sometimes is we may have people have to do evaluations. They're not great writers, or we want to have more consistency. So what I did was everything I did here, I just taught you how to do. Okay. So all of my info is all down here. These are just lists that we selected by range. So now let's look at how this works. So I can select my employees, and you get extra points if you figure out what kind of people these are. Okay. No secret, I'm a big country music fan. So job titles, ratings. And then when it comes to the the job performance things, there's a whole list of items. I could have had 100 more for each item. Okay. So all of these are drop downs, but this is a combo box. So if none of the examples work and you want to write something else, I would hope you'd be a little bit more diplomatic than this. But the point is, it allows you to select from the list and also to be able to type in something else. Now, because I do this for training purposes, I put them all here. If I were actually doing it, for setup, I'll have a tab for each employee, and I'll have one separate tab with all of the comments. Okay. But I showed you basically everything you need to do this. In the sessions, we're going to deep dive where we'll actually be able to look at all the other capabilities under data validation. Okay, I got a couple minutes left. Last thing. So, a little trivia, sort of. Okay, so Excel is not the first spreadsheet, and even today, it's not the only one. As we know, there's Google Sheets, and there's even a few others. But the first spreadsheet was actually a program called VisiCalc. And it was developed in the 70s, early 70s. And it was pretty primitive. But some of the things that we now see in Excel, some of the conventions really come all the way back to that time. So one of the questions that came up at the time was how to handle dates. So what the developer said is, you know what, we're going to treat dates as numbers. So we have to have some standard for how we treat the numbers. So what we'll do is this, we'll just arbitrarily pick a starting point. So it was 1970. They said, you know what, let's start at the turn of the previous century. And we'll just start counting numbers from there. By the way, this only works with dates after 1/1/1900. If you actually have a date earlier, it doesn't even work. Okay. But let me just give you an example of that and then show you. I know this is a bit of trivia. It may not matter to you, but it'll explain to you what the number is. So there I have 1/1/1900. It changed the format. If you actually change that to general, that's a 1. So every day since then is another number. So let's pick today's date. And again, if we change it, we see it's 44,580. So there have been 44,580 days between 1/1/1900 and today. Does anybody care about that? No. Is it important for you to know that? Not particularly, but it may be important if you ever are entering some sort of a date and you're seeing like a 44,000 number, chances are it's a format issue. If you just change it to date, you'll get it right, okay? But there's a more important reason for you to understand that dates are numbers. Because once dates are numbers, there's amazing things you can do. So for example, if I pick, and I'm just picking a date at random, but if I pick 11/30/21 and today's date, always start with your later date. This is just subtraction. I can see that there were 50 days between 11/30/21 and today's date. So that's significant because I can then use that to do things like aging accounts receivable, determining how long books are outstanding in the library, how long it's been, how long a work order is out, any time where I need to track what's happening with any open and closed item, it can do the calculation. Okay, I can also do it moving forward. So if I, for example, wanted to know what 60 days is from today, and usually I don't even have to adjust every once in a while you may have to adjust the formatting, but here it picked it up right away. So I know 60 days from today is 3/20/22. Now, this is every day. It doesn't take out holidays and weekends. There are more advanced functions that will. There's a couple that I like that are really good for transportation because you can actually take out school holidays to estimate how many actual days you're going to have to transport kids. So you can estimate fuel consumption, or in facilities, so you can figure out, utility use because you're going to burn more utilities on a day when school's open than not. But for a lot of the functions we do, this more basic one that doesn't take out weekends and holidays works pretty well. Okay, so we got like 2 minutes left. I just want to show you one more thing that kind of uses this. Okay. And rather than do it again, I could show you one I already did here. I'll just create a couple of dates. Okay. Okay, so now we know how to do this. We already did it. If I want to know the days between each date, and then I should be able to just scroll down, right? Okay, so there's only one problem with this, and it's not a major issue. If I open up this spreadsheet tomorrow, it's wrong. Because tomorrow's not going to be 1/19/22, it's going to be 1/20/22. So it would be nice to have a way for this to update automatically and reflect whatever is today's date in the comparison. So as it turns out, there is a great way to do it. You wouldn't see it here because it's going to look the same unless you pick it up tomorrow, but it's called the today function. And it has no parameters, but you still need the format. So it's equals today, open parentheses, close parentheses, but nothing in between. Got it? So what I now do is it shows up as 1/19. What's beautiful about this is it's picking that date from the clock date on your computer. So if you open up this very spreadsheet tomorrow, it will be 1/20, and all of these days would have clicked forward one more day on how long things are outstanding. So the use of the today function is really terrific when I'm doing things like tracking work orders or determining how long money is owed, or how late people are in getting things in, or anything involving time. And likewise, you can use it for time moving forward as well. So once again, that's a really easy function. It's called just equals today. This one works in Google. Jeez. And it'll just give you today's date. Okay. And it's just, you could use it for other purposes where you just have to put a date on something too. Okay, I pretty much think I finished everything, certainly everything I intended to cover. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to stop the sharing. I am going to stop the recording.